Non mi Gesù.
Hello, boys and girls. Hope you're all doing well this week in the glory, enjoying the bliss of your salvation. I want to talk this week a little bit about Christ and Adam. First of all, I want you to understand that the Trinity, God himself is not just this divine narcissist that has to beat everybody into glorifying him for his own ego, okay? God is always giving love, thinking outside of himself. That's partly why he's Trinity. He is who he is. The Father loves the Son loves the Father, the Spirit. There's this other giving love. And God always wanted to pour his love out, always wanted to give his love. And therefore, humanity is actually, God created humanity so that he could pour his love out upon mankind. John 1 says that the Word was God, the Word was with God, and that the Word became flesh. He stepped into humanity. God wanted to pour himself out on humanity, and the whole purpose of creating humanity was to weave us together into the existence of the Trinity. We have been brought into that circle of love. God has chosen to forever identify himself with humanity. There is no God apart from humanity. The Word became flesh. He's chosen us to be woven into his very identity. And so the crazy thing is that behind all of history, behind all of creation, God's eternal purpose was the gospel. God did not, just create Adam to hang out with a couple of naked vegetarians in the garden and everything's perfect, and then Adam botched it, and so Jesus came as plan B to clean everything up. What we didn't realize is that Jesus was actually plan A rolled up God's sleeve the entire time. God understood that we could never work our way into that circle of the Trinity. And so he stepped in, he wove us into the Trinity. From the very beginning, from the very dawn of time, it was plan A for God to bring us into union with himself. You cannot work your way into that circle. There's nothing you could do to take up your side of that covenant relationship. God had to come and he had to attack your side of the covenant relationship. He invaded your side of the divine human relationship, and he violently on the cross cleansed you and removed all calamity, all depression, all disease, all sin. He eradicated it through his death. God never intended for you to fulfill your side of the covenant. He never once intended to entrust his plan to you. He took care of it. I want to read out of Romans chapter 5 this week, and I want to read quite a bit. I want to go from verses 12 to 21, and then we'll dive into a few good little nuggets in here, okay? It says, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, through Adam, sin came in, right? And death through sin. In this way, death came to all men because all sinned. Through the one man, Adam, all sinned. For before the law was given, sin was in the world. But sin was not taken into account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking the command, as did Adam, who was a pattern of the one to come. Let me break this down and explain this a little bit, okay? Death, the way sin and death works, if you don't know the law, then it's, you can't always be blamed for committing a sin against the law. Nevertheless, sin always brings death. Sin is still sin. So everybody from Adam up until the time of Moses, who represents the law, everybody even before the law, all of them had sinned, and death was worked into all of them. Even though they didn't understand the law of sin and death, nevertheless, death is still the wages of sin. Now, once Moses comes and there's the law given through Moses, then our sin is highlighted. We know that we're sinners. Our darkness is pointed out. It's clear that we're sinners, and it's clear that we are incapable of being righteous on our own. We cannot climb into, on our own, that circle of the Trinity. But the gift, or grace is not like the trespass. Grace is not like sin. For if the many died by the trespass of one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? Again, the gift of God is not like the result of the one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. For if by the trespass of the one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ? Consequently, just as the result of one trespass was condemnation for all men, so also the result of one act of righteousness was justification that brings life for all men. For just as through the disobedience of the one man, the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of one man, the many were made righteous, okay? Through Adam's sin, all were brought into sin, all of Adamic humanity. Jesus came, was nailed to the tree as the righteous one, as your substitute. He stepped into your place. He died for you, as you. He ended that entire old Adamic era, that Paleos Anthropos, that old man, that old age was brought to a final and complete halt on the cross. But here's what you need to understand. It was not just 2,000 years ago that old Adamic nature was brought to an end. The end of the Adamic era came before Adam even existed. He was the lamb who was slain from the foundation of the earth. Christ is plan A, not plan B. Adam's sin was forgiven before he ever committed it. I want to read to you a little bit out of Karl Barth for just a second here. He says, in his own death, in Christ's own death, he makes mankind's peace with God. Before they themselves have decided for this peace, and quite apart from that decision, in believing, they are only conforming to the decision about them that has already been made in him. When you believe that you've been made holy, when you believe that old sinful nature has been eradicated, you are only agreeing with the decision that was already made about you long before your decision was ever made. Also, Barth says this, our former existence outside of Christ is rightly understood as an already still hidden but real existence in him. You were existing in him before you even realized it. Your existence was hidden in him, but nevertheless, it was a real existence. Your relationship with Adam is not your primary, true, original nature. Adam, Romans 5:14 says here, he was only a type. He was only a prefigure. He was only a shadow of the one to come. It's not that Christ was in the image of Adam. It's that Adam was in the image of Christ. I want to read you another quote here from Barth. He says, Adam is the type of him who was to come. Man's essential and original nature is to be found, therefore, not in Adam, but in Christ. In Adam, we can only find it prefigured. Adam can therefore be interpreted only in the light of Christ and not the other way around. Again, he says, our relationship to Adam is only the type, the likeness, the preliminary shadow of our relationship to Christ, the one representing the many. The same human nature appears in both, but the humanity of Adam is only real and genuine insofar as it reflects and corresponds to the humanity of Christ. It says in 1 Corinthians 15:47 that the first man is of the earth, earthy, the second man is from heaven. And so the thing is, believers have been brought out of this sinful nature, and we've been brought into this relationship with the second Adam who annihilated the curse of the old Adam. We've had people ask, well, if two believers who don't have a sinful nature were to get married and have a child, and the curse is broken for these two believers, why doesn't that new little baby not have a sinful nature? Well, here's the thing, the kid never actually even had a sinful nature. Really, if you really want to put it this way, you never even had a sinful nature. Even when you were a sinner, you were believing a false identity. You were believing a lie. The sinful nature is a delusion. Yeah, it exists in the sense that we say you were partaking of the sinful nature, but what we're saying is you were partaking of a deluded experience. There is no independent relationship outside of Christ. And so for this no evil reality to manifest in you, it has to become personal through trust, through faith, by realizing that the old Adamic nature for you doesn't exist anymore. 1 Corinthians 15, 21 through 22 says, as death came through one man, so also the resurrection came through one man. For as in Adam all die, so as in Christ all shall be made alive. And there are similarities between Adam. You can see similarities between Adam and Christ. Adam had no earthly father. He was made out of the mud. And in the same way, Christ, he wasn't born by the will of a man. It literally says in John 1:13, where it says he wasn't born of a will of a man. That's not anthropo, which is man, but andros, husband. Christ was not born by the will of Joseph. He wasn't born by the will of a husband. Okay, Joseph represents the human will. The human will was not a part of the incarnation. Christ, unlike Adam, was God's only begotten son. He was born by the will of God. And so when you're born again, in the same way that Christ was incarnate by the will of God, not by human willpower, so you were born again, not by your human willpower, not by your choice toward God, but because of His choice toward you. You're literally taking part in His birth from above. Your new birth is identification with His incarnation. Your order of knowing Him is identical with His order of being. Both are a gift from above. No human willpower involved. Your ability to know Him is not your ability to pump it up. Your ability to know Him is in the same way as His incarnation was a gift. God stepping into humanity, God in the incarnation forging this union between God and man. Okay, so I'm trying not to go over your head or go a little too fast. I know we're all drunk here on the Jesus trip. There's a lot of whack on the incarnation. There's a lot of whack on the finished work of the cross, okay? Here's the thing. There are parallels between Christ and Adam. Both of them operated in a representative capacity. Adam represented all of mankind. Christ represented all of mankind. Adam was under the lordship of sin and death, which is Christ came, to bring the lordship of grace and life. All of humanity came under sin and death. Now all of humanity brought under grace and life. The guilt and the punishment that we incur in Adam, though they don't have a independent reality of their own. They're only dark kind of shadows pointing to how all of humanity is going to come under grace and life. Grace and life are not a cleanup job. They're the original purpose. So for Adam to fall away from that, all he's doing is pointing to the opposite of being under dominion, but he's under an evil dominion. And so while there are parallels between Adam and Christ, there's also a major difference, a major disparity. That's why it says here in verse 15, which we just read, that the gift, which is grace, is not like the trespass, which is sin. Right here, the parallel stops. One of them affects us all. The one man affects us all. In Adam, it affects all of us. In Christ, it affects all of us, but it's a totally different effect. So you can't compare the sin to the grace. Grace overflowed to all. It's eperisiusian or something like that is the word. How much more did grace overflow to all? The difference between what Adam did to all of man and what Christ did to all of man is such a radical, major, crazy difference. It's as far of a difference as an act of man as an act of God. There's a radical difference. You've been brought into a crazy overflow abundance of the shiggy sauce in Christ. I've got another quote for you here from Karl Barth, okay? It says, Paul is not denying that Adam's sin brings death to all men, but he is affirming that the grace of Christ has an incomparably greater power to make these dead men alive. He's not saying there's no truth in Adam, but he's saying that it is a subordinate truth and that it depends on its validity, on its correspondence with the final truth, which is in Christ. Christ, again, is your first nature. Kingship is your first and primary nature. The only connection between Christ and Adam is that Christ died for Adam. You can't move from left to right. You can't move from Adam to Christ, okay? It's a dead end. It's frustration. You can't move from man to God. It's impossible. Adam is only a true man in that he points to Christ. Adam becomes only a witness to the glory of Christ. You have to look at Christ to see what's truly human. Verses 1 through 11 in chapter 5 are talking about believers, and we can easily miss the bigger picture. Christ is talking about all of humanity right here, okay? And so we have to really change change our understanding, okay? It's not so much about, insider, outsider, saved, unsaved, forgiven, unforgiven. All have been forgiven. But we need to say, we could say believer, unbeliever. Yeah, that's okay. Are you believing this reality, which is reality, or are you in this delusion thinking that you're still somehow outside of that circle of the Trinity? Oh my goodness. There's a lot of whack on you guys. I love you guys. God bless.